President of Peru, Pedro Castillo, announced the temporary closure of the Congress and the installation of a government under a state of exception. CARICOM leaders signed the Bridgetown Declaration, in which they reaffirmed that Caribbean unity and integration is based on historical ties. And Syrian Minister of Foreign Affairs Faisal al-Mikdad received the United Nations Special Envoy Peterson amid efforts to end the conflict in the country. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. The President of Peru, Pedro Castillo, announced on Wednesday the temporary closure of the Congress of the Republic and the installation of a government under a state of exception. The President is accused of several corruption offenses and was facing his third presidential vacancy motion to be debated on Wednesday afternoon. However, he decided to move forward with the congressional votes scheduled for this December the 7th. Castillo pointed out that this measure responds to the citizens' demand for the re-establishment of the rule of law and democracy in the country. The government will proceed to convene snap elections for a new Congress with constituent faculties to elaborate a new constitution in a period of no more than 9 months. Until this new legislative power is installed, Pedro Castillo assured that the government will govern by means of decree laws. Ecuador's Attorney General's office filed a request for an extension and clarification of the resolution issued by a judge in Santo Domingo for the release of former Vice President Jorge Glass. In the request, the Service of Attention to Prisoners considered that there were irregularities on the part of the judge in charge of the case who issued the release of Glass as a violation of judicial protection and lack of competence of the magistrate, since the lawyer was not jurisdiction in Santo Domingo and the accused was detained in Quito. Former Vice President Glass was released on November 28th after being in prison since October 2017 for the alleged crimes of illicit association in the corruption scheme of the Brazilian construction company Odebrecht and for bribery. In the framework of the CARICOM Cuba Summit and the official visit of Cuba's President Miguel Díaz-Canel to Barbados, CARICOM leaders signed the Bridgetown Declaration, in which they reaffirmed that Caribbean unity and the integration is based on historical ties. In a communiqué, the leaders stressed the protection and promotion of human rights for all, regardless of the differences in their political, economic, and social systems. They also rejected the imposition of unilateral coercive measures and called for the immediate cessation of the economic, commercial, and financial blockade imposed by the United States against Cuba. The declaration also calls for the importance of strengthening South-South cooperation for the promotion of the collaboration and development programs. In Bolivia, the National Summit Against Racism and Discrimination advances. The event aims to set a national policy against racial and ethnic discrimination. During this summit, the Minister of Cultures and Decolonization, Sabina Orellana Cruz, called on the working group to respectfully reach conclusions to generate a national policy against racism. Orellana also criticized the last violent incidents carried out by the Pro-Santa Cruz Committee during the 36-day strike in that eastern department. The minister also said that the summit will contribute to the interculturality in the plurinational state and also insisted on the need to self-critically evaluate the role of the national institutions in the fight against racism and discrimination. The plenary session of the Brazilian Senate votes on Wednesday on the so-called Transitional Constitutional Amendment proposal, which seeks to finance Auxílio Brasil, a social assistance program. The proposal's main objective is to ensure the payment of 600 Brazilian reals, equivalent to $112 a month for a family back starting in January. The plan also contemplates raising budgets by more than 27 billion US dollars for the direct subsidies to the project, which aims to aid the poor. The elected government of Lula da Silva also promised additional economic aid for each child up to 6 years old. In Argentina, the League of Governors said the 6-year prison sentence and political disqualification of Vice President Cristina Fernandez is a serious breach of the legal system. According to a statement signed by provincial governors, the sentence can be considered as one of the greatest offenses to the democratic system, as it follows a successful and a process full of irregularities and violations to fundamental constitutional principles and guarantees. They noted that the prosecution failed to review documentary and expert evidence demonstrating the absolute regularity of the public works under investigation. The signatories condemned that the prosecutors and judges involved in the case said she had usurped powers under the exclusive jurisdiction of other areas of government, something constitutionally forbidden. Let's take a short break, but first, remember you can follow us on our TikTok account at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. The increasing frequency of extreme weather events caused by climate change in Central America has become a serious problem for many rural communities, with the economic damage and food shortages forcing many to move away from new opportunities. Xalagua is a town in eastern Guatemala, just kilometers away from the northwestern border of Honduras. Located in the rural heart of Central America, it has seen the serious impacts of climate change firsthand. A decade ago, Xalagua was home to some 600 people, but today, more than a quarter of the residents, almost all of whom are young people, have left. As the main workforce leaves, the local economy is shrinking, forming a vicious cycle. According to Alejandra Mena, spokesperson for the Guatemalan Migration Institute nationwide, around 300 people leave the country every day, with more being forced out by extreme weather.
This whole area used to be productive fields, but the more intense rains and the river changing course have wiped everything out. Climate change is very worrisome. We have lived through it, and I speak for my whole community when I say that we have been badly affected.
Hawaiian authorities have mobilized the National Guard in response to the eruption of the Mauna Loa volcano, the world's largest active volcano, whose lava threatens to reach a major highway in the area. About 20 U.S. National Guard reservists were deployed to assist the Hawaiian County with road traffic management and other tasks relating to the volcanic eruption. The U.S. Geophysical Institute bulletin said the Mauna Loa lava front is now 3.5 kilometers from the road, and conditions make it difficult to estimate it of when the lava flow will touch the asphalt. United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Gutierrez urged immediate efforts to fight climate change and stop the destruction of our planet as he addressed the opening ceremony of the 15th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the United Nations Convention on Biological Diversity in Montreal, Canada.
Corporations are filling their bank accounts while emptying our world of its natural gifts. Ecosystems have become playthings of profit. With our bottomless appetite for unchecked and unequal economic growth, humanity has become a weapon of mass extinction. We are treating nature like a toilet, and ultimately, we are committing suicide by proxy. Because the loss of nature and biodiversity comes with a steep human cost.
And the British Health Minister, Steve Barclay, said on Wednesday the United Kingdom has a good supply of penicillin amid high demand linked to bacterial infections in children. 9 school-age children have been confirmed to have died from illnesses linked to the group of Streptococcus or Strep A infections in the UK in recent weeks. Barclay said there were adequate stocks of penicillin in the country's pharmaceutical stores, while seeking to reassure parents that complications from Strep A were rare. The health secretary said supplies will need to be moved around the country to where it was needed. Barclay's comments came after the National Pharmacy Association said there had been a spike in demand for antibiotics.
We have good supply. The medical suppliers are required to notify us if they've got shortages. Now, sometimes GPs can have particular surgeries if they've got a lot of demand in an area. That's quite routine, and that's quite routine. We can move the stock around our depots, so we have wholesale depots, or the suppliers have wholesale depots. So we're in very close contact with them. As of last night when we checked, they said they could reassure us that they've got good stock and we're moving that around to meet demand. And obviously parents are concerned at the moment because they see the stories. 1 in 5 children have this naturally, Strep A naturally. Complications are very rare, but it's important that we're vigilant, and that's really what the guidance is saying. So if any parents do have a child that's sickly, please look at the NHS website, really clear guidance on there on the things to look out. It is very rare we have these complications, but it's important that people are vigilant at this time.
Police in Germany arrested 25 suspected members or supporters of a domestic terrorist organization aiming to topple the German state. Officials said the network, part of a wider right-wing movement, was already well established, with a concrete plan to overthrow the German state by force and install a new government. The raids were announced by Germany's Federal Prosecution Agency and German Justice Minister Marco Buschmann. Buschmann said the investigations were directed against a suspected terrorist network with known ties to the Reichsbürger movement. He also said that the raids took place on individuals suspected of planning an armed attack on state institutions. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back. In Syria, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Faisal al-Mikdad, received on Wednesday the United Nations Special Envoy, Peterson, amid efforts to end the conflict in the country. Faisal al-Mikdad and Peterson reviewed the latest developments related to the situation in Syria and the EU region. The UN Special Envoy explained the results of these tours and meetings during the last time, as well as the steps he's taking in the framework of his functions. Mikdad detailed the main challenges facing Syria, in particular the negative effects left by terrorism and the unilateral coercive measures imposed by Washington and its allies on that nation, while denouncing the illegal US and Turkish presence in Syrian territory as a clear violation of Syrian sovereignty and the international law. Chinese President Xi Jinping arrived in Saudi Arabia on Wednesday to attend the first China-Arab States Summit and the China Gulf Cooperation Council Summit and paid a state visit to Saudi Arabia. The Chinese head of state arrived in the capital Riyadh for a 3-day visit that focused on energy ties and includes meetings with the Saudi King Mohammed bin Salman. The visit followed an invitation from King Salman to bolster historic ties and strategic partnership between the two countries. The visit came as China looks to deepen its relationships with countries in the Middle East amid growing strains in its ties with the United States and other Western nations. And the South Korean cargo truck drivers' strike continued on Wednesday, despite the executive return to work order given by the national government. Thousands of unionized truckers staged protests outside the office buildings of Hyundai Oil Bank and the SK Energy, the country's major petroleum and refinery companies, amid the government's pressures on the cargo workers. Thousands of members of the Cargo Truckers Solidarity Union have been striking for 2 weeks now. In their second nationwide walkout since June, they called for the government to make a permanent minimum freight rate system that is to expire at the end of 2022. While the minimum fares currently applied to shipping containers and cement, the striking truckers also called for the benefits to be expanded to other cargoes, including oil and chemical tankers, steel and automobile carriers, and package delivery trucks. And Russian officials did not exclude the possibility of moderately reducing its oil production, given the uncertain situation caused by the decision of the European Union and the Group of Seven to cap the price of Russian crude. Meanwhile, Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak, who is in charge of Moscow's energy affairs, stated that Russian oil is in demand on world markets, and the country will continue to sell oil using new insurance mechanisms, new ways of cooperation between companies, and alternative means of transportation. Novak warned that Moscow does not accept the price limit imposed in an artificial and non-market way, which can only lead to a global decline in investment, a shortage of oil supplies, and finally, an even greater increase in prices. EU member states agreed last week on a $60 per barrel cap on the price of Russian seaborne crude. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that the West is resisting a multipolar world because it means the loss of its privileged position. The Russian diplomat, speaking on the second and last day of the 8th Priam-Kov Readings International Forum, said that the main reason for the continuing imbalance in the world system is the unwillingness for the Western minority to accept multipolarity and to abandon its hegemonic aspirations. The head of Russian diplomacy argued that the imbalance of power is changing and not in favor of the United States and its allies, so they seek to maintain their position and try to slow down the formation process of a multipolar world order. On Wednesday, a man blew himself up outside a police station in Indonesia's main island of Java, in what appeared to be the latest in a string of suicide attacks in the world's most populous Muslim nation. Badung Police Chief Aswin Sipayun said a man tried to enter the Astana Anyar police station with a motorcycle and detonated explosive where police were waiting for morning assembly, injuring at least 3 officers. He also said police are still investigating the attacks in West Java's Bandung city and whether the man, who has not been identified, had links to radical groups. Indonesia has battled militants since bombings on the resort island of Bali in 2002 killed 202 people, mostly foreign tourists. And just as the hearts of millions of fans live the emotions of the Qatar 2022 World Cup, TeleSUR joins this sporting event with From the Field, a show that brings news, analysis, reviews, and more to our audience. Don't miss it. Our show airs 1 p.m. local time in Caracas and 12 p.m. New York. Remember, From the Field, only on TeleSUR. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.